When we talk about giant monster battles, few names carry the legacy, power, and raw screen presence of Kong. From his tragic climb up the Empire State Building in King Kong to his modern-day dominance in the MonsterVerse, Kong has faced some of the most terrifying creatures ever imagined. But among all his clashes, which battles were the most risky? Which fights pushed him to the edge of death? Today, we're breaking down the most dangerous, high-stakes Kong battles against other monsters across film history. Kong has always been more than just a giant ape. He's a thinking, feeling warrior forced into brutal survival scenarios. And unlike some monsters that rely purely on destructive energy blasts, Kong fights up close. He bleeds. He struggles. He adapts. That's what makes his riskiest battles so intense, because every fight feels personal. Let's start with one of the most legendary matchups in Kaiju history, Kong vs. Godzilla in King Kong vs. Godzilla. This was the first time these two titans collided, and it was an absolute spectacle for its era. At that time, Godzilla already had atomic breath, incredible durability, and near unstoppable power. Kong, on the other hand, relied on agility and raw strength. The risk here was enormous. Godzilla had ranged attacks, nuclear durability, and years of dominance behind him. Kong had to close the distance without being incinerated. In that film, Kong gains electrical abilities, which help level the playing field, but the fight remains brutal. One miscalculation and he would have been vaporized. The risk factor, extremely high. Fast forward decades later to Godzilla vs. Kong, where the stakes were even higher. This wasn't a campy 60s showdown, this was modern, cinematic warfare. Kong faced a fully powered, alpha-level Godzilla at the peak of his strength. The ocean battle alone showed how risky this fight was. Kong was chained on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the ocean, Godzilla's home turf. Fighting a nuclear-powered sea predator underwater. That's nearly suicidal, and Godzilla nearly drowned him. It took human intervention just to keep Kong alive. Later in Hong Kong, the rematch pushed Kong to absolute limits. Godzilla dislocated his shoulder and left him on the brink of death. Kong only survived because humans restarted his heart. That's about as risky as it gets. But Godzilla isn't the only monster that nearly killed Kong. In Kong, Skull Island, we see a younger Kong defending his territory against the terrifying Skullcrawlers. The biggest threat, the monstrous Skull Devil, officially known as the Big One. These creatures weren't just mindless beasts, they were evolved predators specifically adapted to hunt Kong's species. The Skull Devil had razor-sharp limbs, immense durability, and relentless aggression. During their final fight, Kong was stabbed, choked, and nearly overwhelmed. At one point, he was pinned and close to suffocation. The risk was amplified because Kong was still growing, he wasn't even at full strength yet. Had he fallen, Skull Island would have been completely overrun. This wasn't just survival, it was extinction-level stakes. Another incredibly risky encounter came in Peter Jackson's King Kong. This version of Kong faced multiple V-Rex dinosaurs in one of the most savage fight sequences ever put on screen. 3 V-Rex predators attacking at once. Each one had bone-crushing jaws and predatory intelligence. Kong had to protect Andera while fighting off all 3. That's a nightmare scenario, defending someone while battling multiple apex predators. He was bitten, slammed, and nearly crushed. One wrong move and the V-Rex could have torn him apart. The choreography of that fight makes it clear, Kong survived through sheer ferocity and tactical instinct. But the risk, off the charts. Speaking of dinosaurs, even the original King Kong showed how dangerous Kong's world was. His fight against the Tyrannosaurus was groundbreaking for cinema and extremely risky within the story. The T-Rex had lethal jaws and brute strength. Kong ultimately wins by breaking its jaw, but the struggle shows he's not invincible. That battle established a formula: Kong fights close, takes damage, and ends fights with overwhelming physical dominance. It's always risky because he puts himself directly in harm's way. Now let's talk about psychological risk and strategic disadvantage. In Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, Kong faces new threats deep within the Hollow Earth. Without spoiling too much, Kong encounters enemies that challenge him not just physically but hierarchically. These aren't random beasts, they are organized, dominant forces with power structures. Fighting within Hollow Earth means fighting on unstable terrain, unknown rules, and against creatures adapted to that environment. Kong doesn't just risk death, he risks losing control over his ancestral domain. Territorial loss for an alpha titan is catastrophic. The risks here are cultural, physical, and existential. And we can't ignore Mechagodzilla's involvement in Godzilla vs. Kong. While Kong didn't fight Mechagodzilla alone at first, he still stepped into battle against a mechanized, technologically enhanced killing machine. Mechagodzilla had the speed of Kong, the power of Godzilla, and zero hesitation. No fatigue, no emotion, just programmed destruction. Kong was already exhausted and injured from fighting Godzilla, yet he still charged in. That's an insanely risky move. If Godzilla hadn't powered up Kong's axe, Mechagodzilla could have finished them both. This was one of the rare moments where teamwork saved Kong's life. One underrated but incredibly risky battle is Kong versus the Warbats in Godzilla vs. Kong inside the Hollow Earth. The Warbats had serpentine bodies designed for constriction. One wrapped around Kong and nearly suffocated him. Suffocation is a consistent vulnerability for Kong because, unlike Godzilla, he needs oxygen constantly. The Warbats exploited that weakness perfectly. Kong only survived because humans intervened again. Without assistance, that fight could have ended right there. So what makes a Kong battle truly risky? It comes down to 4 key factors: environmental disadvantage, opponent power level, numerical disadvantage, and exhaustion. When all 4 combine, Kong is at his most vulnerable. Environmental disadvantage: the ocean battle with Godzilla. Numerical disadvantage: the 3 V-Rex attack. Power imbalance: Godzilla's atomic breath. Exhaustion plus advanced opponent, Mechagodzilla. These fights weren't just visually impressive, they were survival scenarios where death was realistic. Kong's fighting style itself increases risk. He chooses close combat, he grapples, he wrestles, he uses tools like his axe, but he always engages directly. This is heroic, but dangerous. Compare that to Godzilla, who can level cities from a distance. Kong has to get close to win. That proximity is what makes every fight nerve-wracking. Another interesting factor is growth. In Kong Skull Island, Kong is still an adolescent titan. By the time we see him in Godzilla vs. Kong, he's significantly larger and stronger. That means earlier battles were even riskier because he hadn't reached full power yet. The Skull Devil fight becomes even more impressive when you realize Kong wasn't at his peak. Emotion also adds to risk. Kong fights to protect his island, his allies, even humanity at times. Protecting others divides attention and creates openings. In King Kong, protecting Andero nearly costs him his life multiple times. Emotional attachment makes him predictable, but also heroic. If we ranked his most dangerous fights based purely on near-death outcomes, the top 3 would likely be the ocean battle with Godzilla in Godzilla vs. Kong, the Hong Kong rematch in the same film, and the Triple V-Rex fight in King Kong. All 3 left Kong visibly battered and seconds away from defeat. But here's what makes Kong special: he learns. After losing to Godzilla initially, he adapts his tactics. He uses the environment. He uses tools. He times his strikes. Kong evolves mid-battle. That adaptability lowers risk over time, but it never removes it completely. Unlike purely destructive monsters, Kong represents resilience. Every risky battle shapes him. Every near-death experience forces growth. That's why audiences connect with him more emotionally than many other titans. He's not an unstoppable force, he's a survivor. And maybe that's the biggest risk of all. Kong doesn't have built-in nuclear reactors or mechanical armor. He has instinct, strength, and heart. When he steps into battle against monsters like Godzilla, Skullcrawlers, V-Rexes, Warbats, or Mechagodzilla, he's betting everything on grit and intelligence. So the next time you watch a Kong fight, look beyond the explosions and destruction. Think about the stakes. Think about the disadvantages. Think about how many times he's been seconds from death. That's what makes his battles legendary. Because when Kong fights, it's never safe. It's never easy. And it's always risky.